Hello Year 9s and 10s, welcome to today's lesson. It's lesson 8 on rates of decomposition or rates of decay. Throughout the lesson I'll probably be swapping the two phrases around, but they mean exactly the same thing. This is a separate science lesson only, so if you're in Year 9 and you're taught by Miss Dennis, Mr Phillips or Mr Croft, you should be watching this, and in Year 10 if you're taught by myself or Mr Phillips, then you should be watching this as well. If you're in any other class, they've accidentally set you this, so please send me a little message on Show My Homework saying you've set us a separate science only lesson. Mr O'Neill asked me to do this lesson because out of all the science teachers, I am one of the oldest and therefore probably starting to slowly decay as we go along. He does call me the old goat. I'm thinking it's a term of endearment, but who can tell? Okay, so as with all the lessons, we're going to start with a recap quiz. If you look on the right hand side of the screen, there are two cycles there to try and give you some ideas about what some of the answers might be, just to trigger some memories there. But what I'd like you to do is give yourself 3 minutes to answer these questions. So I'd just like you to pause the video now while you answer those questions. I'm not cheating, just looking, see what you're doing. You're not writing anything yet, and you haven't paused. Can you do that now for me? Cheers. And you're back. Well done for pausing and answering those questions. So as you can see, the answers are here. So the two types of organisms that are involved in the decay process are decomposers and detritivores. I really struggle with that last one. So detritivores are those small animals which feed on all the dead matter, both plant and animal, and also on waste. Yes, they eat poo. Not advised for us humans. The 6 main processes involved in the water cycle are evaporation, condensation, precipitation, so that's any form of water falling down from the clouds. So it could be hail, snow, rain, all of those. Percolation, which is where the water trickles through the rocks and the soil, and transpiration. But let's not forget respiration. It's not on that diagram, but every living thing is respiring 24 hours every day. Okay, but that's not on there, but you do need to remember that one. Water is vital for living things because if you think about our cells, they're in particular cytoplasm, that's where all the chemical processes take place. So water enables all those materials that are going to be involved in those chemical processes to diffuse through to where the enzymes are and let those chemical reactions take place. So if it's all dried up, the materials can't diffuse as quickly and the cell will die eventually. Transpiration is the loss of water through the leaves, and it's by evaporation. So when the stomata's open, some of the water can leave and evaporate out. Hope you got most of those right. Well done if you did. If you didn't, just make some notes, improve those answers because these ones are quite key to this topic. Okay, so these keywords today, hopefully they should be self-explanatory, but I've put in little explanations just in case and just to refresh your memory. So if you can't remember the exact meaning of them, then please add them to your glossary. Otherwise, you're fine to carry on. On this slide, what you can see are the 6 main factors that affect the rate of decay or the rate of decomposition. So when we talk about the rate of decomposition, it's just how quickly something is decaying. So if it has a high rate of decomposition, it's breaking down really, really quickly. If it has a low rate of decomposition, it's going to be hanging around for quite a long time. And these are the things that affect it. So we've got temperature that affects it, we've got the amount of moisture in the environment or the surroundings, we've got the availability of the decomposers themselves. pH is a big factor as well, as is the availability of oxygen, but also one of the ones we tend to forget is actually the build-up of toxic substances. What I would like you to do when you're doing revision notes is, as you can see, I've put like 6 pictures there on the slide because for me, I remember things in pictures. So it's a really good idea to try when you're making notes, not to worry too much about words as well as like sentences, but sometimes just to do little diagrams, because your brain remembers diagrams so much better, and the more colourful your diagrams are, that helps strengthen the memory link as well. So here we come to our first question based on the rates of decay lesson. What I'd like you to do is just pause this video and answer this question. I would like you to recall the 6 factors that affect the rate of decomposition. Pause the video now. Seriously, it's like being on Hogwarts. I feel like I'm one of those paintings on Harry Potter, just looking around. Might zip out in a minute. Pause it. Oh, you're back, well done. Okay, so you should have remembered temperature, pH, moisture levels, availability of oxygen, availability of the decomposers themselves, and buildup of toxic substances. Well done if you got all 6. If you didn't, don't worry, go back, make some diagrams, some little pictures to match each of those. So when you think of availability of oxygen, what springs to mind? What image does oxygen bring into your head? Make a really colourful diagram involving that. Okay? The first 2 factors we're going to focus on are temperature and pH. Now the reason for that is to do with the cytoplasm. Okay, so if you remember, the cytoplasm is in all living cells, and it's where the majority of the chemical reactions take place. Now, inside the cytoplasm are lots and lots of enzymes. So each chemical reaction that happens in the cytoplasm has its own enzyme. Because if you remember, the active site is specific to the substrate that it's going to be broken down, or the reactant that's going to be made into something else. Now this is a topic we first covered back in Biology Paper 1 in the organisation topic, so it has been a fair few months since you revised this or even learnt it for the first time, so don't worry if you need a little bit of a memory jog. But there's 2 graphs that are associated with enzymes, and they look like this. So we've got one showing the temperature, so this one up here is showing the temperature, and this one down here is showing the pH. And if you look, they've both got a dotted line that coincides with where the peak in that graph is. Okay, and what happens with temperature, if it's below the optimum temperature, all those reactants aren't moving around so quickly, so they're not actually getting to the active site very quickly, so those chemical reactions can't go very fast. If, however, the temperature goes past the optimum temperature, this is the active site here, there's lots and lots of bonds, and year 9s we haven't talked about chemical bonds yet, but year 10s we have. There's lots and lots of chemical bonds in here, but there's also lots of intermolecular forces in between the amino acids that are making up the enzyme, because don't forget, enzymes are actually proteins. Now, when we go past the optimum temperature, these intermolecular forces and intramolecular forces get broken. And what actually happens is that the active site of the enzyme starts changing shape. We call it denaturing. So actually the substrate can't fit and make a tight lock, and that slows the breaking apart of the glucose or whatever's being used by the anaerobic organisms to actually break it down. Same sort of thing happens with pH. If it's too acidic or too alkali, the active site shape of that enzyme will change. Okay, and it becomes denatured, so that substrate can't fit in and make a nice tight lock. Okay, so it's question time. So on this slide, there's 3 gorgeous questions for you to have a go at. Okay, so give yourself about 90 seconds to do it. That should be enough. So if you'd like to pause the video now, that'd be great. And I'll see you on the next slide with the answers. All right, see you in a bit. Hello, Poppets. Did you pause for me and answer those questions? Fabulous. If you did, here are the answers. So remember, we talked about there being lots and lots of enzymes in the cytoplasm, and they're the ones that get affected by the temperature and the pH. If it gets too hot, decay will stop because the enzymes become denatured, and it means the chemical reactions can't take place and the microorganisms die. Same happens if the pH becomes too acidic. Again, those pesky enzymes, the root of all driving forward, catalysing of chemical reactions, they're very sensitive little beasts. They're not beasts, they're not living, just saying that. They become denatured as well. So they'll stop working and it will cause the microorganisms to die. Well done if you got all of those right. If you didn't, don't worry about it. Go through, improve your answers, that'd be great. Okay, so the next two factors that we're going to look at are moisture and oxygen. So if we start with moisture first. If there's too much water around and the cell doesn't have a cell wall, and I'll just find my pen here so you can start to see it. So these top ones up here, these are cells that don't have a cell wall. So for example, animal cells. Now, we're not actually too worried about these, but there are certain bacteria that don't actually have a cell wall. So they're not as safe and protected as other types of bacteria are. So if too much water is inside those cells, they're literally just going to burst open and they'll die. Equally, if they don't have enough water in, remember those the materials can't diffuse through, and they can't get the chemical reactions going because it's just they've dried out and those materials can't pass through. Same thing happens in terms of there not being enough water in all those cells that do have a wall. So I'm just going to change colour here to orange, so these ones down here. So if there's too little water in the cell, the materials can't go through, the cytoplasm is all dried up, the materials can't diffuse through to the enzymes, the chemical reactions can't take place. But equally, if there's too much water, all those materials are diluted out and not enough materials get through to the enzymes for those chemical reactions to take place. Okay, so that's water. Oxygen is all to do with respiration. So if you remember, the 7 living processes, the 7 signs of something being alive, can be remembered by the mnemonic Mrs. Gren, or you might know it by Mrs. Nerg. And one of the R's is respiration. All living things respire, and they respire 24 hours every day. Okay, even plants respire during the night and the day. They don't just stop. Same occurs actually in fungi and bacteria. So if they're aerobically respiring, and remember this happens, aerobic respiration happens in the mitochondria, it's not in the cytoplasm. If there's not enough oxygen, they can't respire, they can't release energy, and energy also helps all those chemical reactions that the enzymes are involved in take place. Okay. So what I'd like you to do now, yes, you have guessed it, I would like you to pause the video and have a go at these questions. Okay, pause it. Fabulous. See you on the next slide. Okay, so well done for giving those a go. Let's go through the answers together. So microorganisms grow faster in moist conditions because the moisture allows them to digest their food and it prevents them from drying out. So remember, all those materials can diffuse through to the enzymes to make them happen. Decomposers respire aerobically. Remember, we talked about that happening in the mitochondria. The microorganisms use the energy created to grow and also to reproduce. We're nearly there. You're doing really good. Well, we're nearly there on the factors. We've got the bits to do yet. So the last 2 ones are the actual decomposers themselves. If we can stop decomposers being there in the first place, if we can kill them, then our food in particular won't decay. So this is used in particular with our food in terms of pickling. So pickled beetroot, pickled onions. I've heard some people eat pickled eggs. It's weird, I know. I just said it, I don't eat it. So pickling is where you take your food and you actually cover it in vinegar. Now vinegar is actually an acid, so it's kind of a lower pH than neutral, and that's too acidic for the decomposers to survive. So those enzymes don't work, chemical reactions don't happen, the bacteria and the fungi, they die. So they're not around to actually break down the food. So we can keep our food, we can store it for months and it'll be absolutely fine. Same thing with freezing. So if we take the temperature really, really low, we're going to kill those decomposers and our food will stay fresh for months. Okay. The last factor is actually those toxic substances. If there is a build-up of toxic substances, one of them in particular is alcohol, then our decomposers will die. Now, yeast is a fungi, and we use yeast to make bread, and we also use yeast in the alcohol industry. If yeast respires anaerobically, and you might remember this from bioenergetics topic, again, back in paper 1, if yeast respires anaerobically, one of the products that we utilise is alcohol. But actually, alcohol is toxic to the yeast particles themselves, the yeast cells themselves. So if it's in a closed environment, the reason why we can drink alcohol after using the fungi that's available on the, if you're making beer, on the hops, so the reason what they do is they take the hops, they add a little bit of sugar, there's yeast on the outside of the hops already, the yeast will use the sugar in the hops to make alcohol. But if it's in a closed environment, like a bottle, that alcohol that it's actually producing kills the yeast. Same in wine production, anything else. So if we want decomposition to happen, we need to do it in an open environment where those toxic substances can just diffuse out into the environment. Okay? You've guessed it. There's another question. So what I'd like you to do now is pause the video and tell me why we need microorganisms for decay to happen. I'd like to pause the video now. That'd be great. Well done for that. Okay, so microorganisms decompose the organic material. When I say organic material, I mean dead plants and animals. When we talk about organic compounds, organic materials, they're the ones that are containing a lot of carbon. And you probably covered that when you did the carbon cycle earlier in this topic. Okay. Okay, so now it's time to look at where we want decay to happen. And a really good example of that is either a compost bin or a compost heap. Okay, so in the picture on the screen, you've got a picture of a compost heap, and it's actually winter. We've got lots of decomposers there, so there'll be lots of bacteria, lots of fungi. The fungi in particular really like compost heaps, so you can find lots of little mushrooms and things like that, not edible ones, but they will be there. We'll also have, you can see it's in an open environment, so there's lots of oxygen there. And the best thing to do is every so often, if you want to grow compost, just put a fork into your compost and turn it over, just so that there's some more oxygen cycling in and getting through it. We need to have the temperature. So if you look at the picture, it's winter or kind of autumn, and you can actually see the water moisture coming off, because the compost heaps actually do generate quite a lot of heat. Okay. Also, if you've got a compost bin in your back garden, or your parents have got an allotment, most compost bins are actually black plastic or dark green, and this is because dark colours absorb more energy. Okay, but that's a topic in waves in physics, paper 2, so we'll come across that later on. But try and make these links now, if you can. We also need some moisture in there, so there's quite a lot of moisture around in a compost heap. It's open, so those toxic substances can't build up, and in a compost bin, if you look, there's at the bottom, there's like a little trapdoor that you can open, and you'll get some like substances leaking out every so often. And also pH, we need to make sure the pH is okay. Now, if you really want your compost bin to work really well, you drop a couple of worms in there as well, because don't forget, worms are detrivores, so they'll eat quite a lot of the dead plant and animal material that's there as well. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is pull in all those factors that we've talked about and answer in your books or in your booklet why compost breaks down more quickly in summer than it does in winter. So if you'd like to pause the video now, give yourself about 4 minutes to do this one, because I'd like detail, please. As much detail as you can. Lots of keywords if you can get them in there. That'd be great. So pause the video now. And here's the answer. Well done. So, the rate of chemical reactions in decomposers speed up with an increase in temperature. Okay, now obviously that depends on how hot it gets, but most countries the average temperature doesn't get too far above 37 degrees C. The average temperatures are much warmer in summer than in winter, so the rate of decomposition increases. Okay. Well done if you've got that. Try and tick the keywords, make sure you're happy with those. If you missed any little bits out, just add those in now. That's absolutely fine. Now, we've talked so far about aerobic respiration. This one here is all about anaerobic respiration. So in certain countries where they don't have a national grid like we do, and we go into the national grid in physics paper 1, in the electricity topic and the energy topic, they can make their own energy. Okay. And it's all to do with making biogas. And the biogas that we're talking about in this particular diagram is methane. Okay, so what happens is they'll have a sealed vessel, so just a sealed pot, that they will put manure, yes, that can be human or animal, and they'll put any garden waste in there, any food waste in there, and it's sealed off, so no oxygen can get in. Okay, so it's really important. We want anaerobic decomposition to happen here, because that's when we produce methane. So in the diagram, you can see that, let me take it red, because then you can see where I'm going. The methane's building up, we've got lots of bubbles going through this nice sloppy mess we've got there of all the manure decomposing. And the methane is actually piped into the people's houses. Okay, now we can burn the methane. We can burn the methane for cooking, we can burn the methane for heating, and we can also burn the methane to generate electricity. So this bit's really important if you are living out in the middle of nowhere with no electricity cables coming to your house. You can generate your own electricity. Carbon dioxide is released in this process. However, it's considered carbon neutral because the carbon dioxide that is produced is actually absorbed by the plants during photosynthesis. Okay, those plants are then eaten by the animals that are producing the manure, so they're getting fed back in this own little cycle that's going on. Okay, there are some countries, so African, in certain places in Africa, they will build a school in like a big circle, and in the middle of that circle is one of those biogas generators, and all the toilets in the school will feed into the biogas generator, and they produce enough electricity to actually feed, to power that school and also the surrounding houses around, which is just ingenious, making electricity through waste. Brilliant. So the optimum temperature of this is about 30 degrees C. So it's ideal in countries that have a hot climate. So with ideal conditions, what you can do, if you have 10 kilograms of dry dung, because you don't want it too moist, with 10 kilograms of dry dung, you can actually make 30 meters cubed of biogas. And that biogas, remember, is methane. Now that methane, that amount of methane, can actually provide 3 hours cooking or 3 hours lighting, or it can actually run electrical equipment such as a washing machine. So you can see how if you're not in a built-up area, in a major city or town in some of these developing countries, a biogas generator is absolutely essential if you need electricity to run things. Okay? Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is pause the video and explain to me what a biogas generator is. Fabulous. Cheers. Okay, so a biogas generator is a large vessel where plant and animal waste are decomposed anaerobically. So I really like you to underline that anaerobic bit. That bit is absolutely key to the production of biogas. And the biogas that's produced is actually methane gas, the same stuff that we use in the science labs, and they use it as a fuel. So you now have a choice of summary questions. So these same questions, if you can't see them very well, they should be on the booklet as well that matches today's lesson. So you have a choice. You can either state the 2 types of organisms that are involved in the process of decay and describe why the process of decay are so important in keeping the soil fertile. So that's one of the options. But I'd like keywords, please. Lots of keywords. Don't forget, for descriptions, if you want to, you can do diagrams. I don't know if you think they're suitable for this, but diagrams are also a description. The second option is turning over the contents of a compost heap every so often can increase the rate at which decomposition takes place, and explain why. And again, make sure you've got key terms in there. The third option is there's a little link to a YouTube video on there. I'd like you to watch that, and then I'd like you to suggest a possible explanation as to why the woolly mammoth did not decompose. Your choice. These summary tasks are the ones that your teachers will actually be paying more attention to and give you the feedback on. So please make sure you give yourself some good amount of time to do that. I would say no less than 10 minutes. That'd be great. If you've got any questions about the contents, please do email your teacher. Don't forget there's also the Science Help email address as well. All right, take care, enjoy it, see you soon.